Hey everyone, Luke Cook and Matt Goldman here from SSW TV, and today we are going to be looking at .NET MAUI, and we're diving into user input and how we have our app interact with the user, how they put data into it, how we handle that data, and how we might store it. Is that right?
Yeah, let's have a look at that.
Yeah? All right, so where do we start?
Well, let's start with the Hello Luke app that we've been building across the past couple of videos.
2022, yes.
That's right. Well, we can start by putting that in here, so let's go and do that now.
Okay.
Label, and we'll go text equals copyright Luke Cook 2022, and that should appear at the bottom there for us. I think are we running? Do we have hot reload running?
Yes.
I'm just going to go and hot reload that now. No, I think we've got to restart the app.
Okay.
So we'll see that in there when we fire it back up again. Let's just go and horizontally center it, just like everything else. And you know what? I'm going to make the font size small.
Oh, good. I was just about to ask that. Yeah, cool.
So this font size here is actually an enum. It accepts any of these values.
Yep.
But it's flexible enough that I can even just put in a value like 8, and that will give me 8-point sized font.
Yep.
So that's something that's quite cool that you can do with Xamarin. You know, it's got this IntelliSense in Visual Studio for you as well.
Yep.
But really what we want to do is we want to see what's going to happen when you put in user input.
Yeah.
So
what are we going? Text box?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go text box. Before we do that, let's just have a look at what this app currently does. Right?
Okay.
So at the moment, we've got a little bot, and we've got some labels, and we've got a button. There's your little copyright label.
Yes.
There's
good.
the date picker,
Yep.
which doesn't do anything. And there's this button, which when you click it, it changes the text to say clicked.
Yep.
Okay. What I want to do is I want to have a little box here where the user can put in a number, and it will increment a count by that number every time you click the button.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
So let's do that.
And let's test it with -1 straight away.
Okay.
All right, good.
So we've got a button, and we've got an event handler that we looked at in the last video. That's already wired up, so we're not going to need to do anything from that. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add something that the user can put a value in for, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be an entry. So that is like a HTML input. It's called entry. And I'm going to give it a name. And the name is going to be value entry, because it's going to be the value that we're entering.
So
right?
creative.
I know,
yeah,
I know.
So creative. Okay.
Okay. So that's all we need to do with that for now. I am also going to put another label up here, and I'm going to call this one counter. I'll call it counter.
Okay.
And I'm going to make the font size 18. Make it nice and big.
Sure.
And let's just center it as well, because that's what we're expecting here. Okay.
Now, before we go any further, the first question I have is this entry, which you said is the same as input. We are expecting the user to put in a numeric value. Yeah. And in HTML, that's really easy, right? Yeah. Everyone knows to put the type of number there. Do you have the similar sort of parameters that you can put in?
You do.
Yeah?
Well, you do. There's a number of things that you can do. You can do input parameters, and you do various other things as well, including validation. Yep. But for now, let's just do I can't remember what the attribute is.
Gotcha.
You did. Yeah.
All right, let's just pretend like we've got that in there right now. We can test it with like ABC later.
Here it is. It's keyboard.
Oh, keyboard.
Right? So I can put keyboard, and I can choose chat, default, email, numeric, plain, telephone, text, or URL. You want numeric, right?
Do, yes.
Okay, so numeric.
Cool. And again, that will now render out to my Android device or my iOS device, like with a numeric input only.
Yeah, and we're going to run it on Android, so we'll see that. Like if you run it on Windows, you've got a physical keyboard. You're not using an on-screen keyboard, so it works differently. But on Android or on iOS, it shows you a numeric keyboard.
So you're saying running this on Windows, the keyboard type of numeric has no effect?
Has no effect.
Okay, so it would still allow you on Windows to key in ABC?
Let's try it.
Okay.
Let's see what happens. Let's run this now. We're going to do some more things with this, but for now, let's just run it and see what happens. Because of course, Windows obviously does support touchscreen, so you can have a numeric, an on-screen keyboard in Windows. So I wouldn't say that it does nothing, because if you're using a touchscreen on Windows and you tap into an editable field, it's going to bring up an on-screen keyboard for you. And on Windows, that's still going to be numeric. But the
Holy text box! Look at the size of that thing. Yeah.
We'll set a width on that. In fact, let's just do that now.
No. One thing. Let's see if it does ABC.
Okay, ABC.
Oh,
so,
yes, it does. Okay. Yeah.
So it just that attribute just affects what keyboard is displayed.
Yep.
Like I said, you can use validation, so you could limit that, and you can use a mask as well, which can also limit that. That's not out of the box. There are plugins to do that. But yeah, let's just tidy this up a bit. So width request, let's make it 200.
200 what?
Good question. I'm glad you asked. 200 DIUs, device independent units.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a device independent unit is, they have different names on different platforms, like density independent unit or device independent pixels. In web browsers, they're just called points. But they all equate to roughly the same thing, which is where a value of 1 is about 1/60th of an inch.
Okay. Sure. I'm sure I'll remember that. But yeah. Okay. So basically, just an integer. Play with it. Figure out what you want.
Yeah. Look. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. You can get a bit more specific than that. Notice the gap here.
Yep.
Because that's where our label is. It currently doesn't have a value, but it still has the space allocated.
Ah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, all right, so what we wanted to do is we want to get the value from this text box, and we wanted to use it to increment a value here.
We do.
Okay, so what we need to do is we now need to go into the C# code. Not in this one. In this one, this is the code behind the file. Let's see, we have a field here called count. Currently starts at 0.
Yep.
What I'm going to do is in my constructor here, I'm going to set my label. Now, just remind me, did I give this a label? I did, right. So I'm going to set the text property of that counter label to that. Okay.
Yep.
And what I'm going to do is at the end of this
Squiggling because it wants it to be a string.
string,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah. And at the end of this method here is I'm going to do that every time we click the button as well.
You have to rebind it like that, do you?
So we're not actually binding here. This isn't data binding.
Okay.
I'll show you that a bit later on. But for now, we're literally, so this isn't bound. This is not bound. This is setting this value, the value of this property, to a value here.
So it's just set and forget here. We have to go and manually update it.
That's right.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you can see here that we're doing count plus plus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get rid of that because we don't want to do that. And we don't want this stuff here either, right? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to get the value that the user has input. Mm-hmm. So we'll go var incrementer, I guess. Why don't I call it step? That probably makes more sense.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was value entry dot text, and we also actually want that to be an int. So can I just cast that to an int, or do I need to do int dot pass? I think I need to do int dot pass.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're going to do...
Which will immediately break on Windows because we can type in letters, but it's good enough for now, right?
Yeah, so, you know, if this was going to be an app that I was expecting anyone other than myself to ever touch, I'd put some validation there, and I would, I would, make that a bit more robust.
Okay, but we have a step now.
Yeah. So instead of doing plus plus, I'm going to do plus equals step, and then the next thing is we're going to set the text property of that label to that value.
What is the line in the middle that you haven't touched?
Good question. Okay, so .NET MAUI is very accessibility or A11Y friendly. Mm-hmm. So here, what this is doing is this is saying that, in fact, what I should do is change this just to make sense. So what we were doing with the out-of-the-box demo was when we were clicking the button, we were changing the text of the button. Yeah. So this is saying that a screen reader should announce what that value now is because it's changed.
Right.
I've changed it to say announce the value of the counter.text property, because that's the bit that we're now changing. So .NET MAUI is super friendly to assistive technologies like screen readers, and it makes it very easy to build accessibility into your apps. Something that we didn't talk about in the XAML earlier as well is you can see that we've got these semantic properties here on these controls in the XAML as well, right?
Okay, that's really nice, because like a lot of people just don't even think about it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Microsoft is super focused on this. In fact, they've got someone whose job it is to really, they've got lots of people, one person in particular, making sure all this stuff works and making sure developers know how to do it.
Yeah,
There's a series of videos on accessibility in .NET MAUI apps by someone called Rachel Kang from .NET MAUI, well worth checking out.
I will, yeah. So back to our code behind, I'm assuming then that semantic screen reader.announce should probably go underneath where we're setting counter.text to be the new value.
Good catch. It should.
Yep.
It should, you're right.
Okay. So we are now just setting our counter label, the text property, to our new count value, and then announcing it for any screen readers that are sort of listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Should we run it?
Yep.
Now I've just thought of a potential bug here, is that step should probably be another field that should start with an initial value, because if I click this now, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to break, right?
Yep.
So let's go and add a 2 in here, and that should now go up by 2 each time.
Yep.
If I make it, pick a number.
8.
8. So this should go to 18, then 26, and so on and so forth. Cool. Magic.
Neg 50.
Oh, good question. I think it's going to go to 0, which it does.
And again. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah. Nice.
You tried to break it.
I did, yeah. Now put ABC. We'll see what happens.
That is going to break it. That's going to throw an exception.
I want to see what happens when
so of course we get an exception for that.
Cool.
Now, of course, we can easily handle that by wrapping it in a try-catch. We can put some validation on there. Incidentally, there is a property here that we can set on this button called isEnabled. Right, so I can set that to true or false, and of course I can set that in the code as well.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, there's also an onChanged event here as well.
So you could wire it up in many different ways then, basically.
Yeah. So I could, oops, I'm just going to get rid of my mess that I made there. So every time you change the value of that entry, we could fire the onChanged event, which could then determine whether or not that button was enabled.
Yeah. Very, very familiar to how you would expect to do it in sort of front-end UIs as well, then, right?
Because that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when we first started talking about .NET MAUI, I asked about being able to use EF Core across these devices, and you said absolutely. You get access to all of the NuGet packages and all of that sort of .NET namespace goodies. Show me how you now store a value. Say writing it just to the device, the file system, right? This is one of the benefits of actually having a proper app as opposed to a web app.
Yeah.
So how do I go about storing, say, the value that has last been written to that label?
Okay, so there's a number of ways that you can do it, right? So .NET MAUI has a cross-platform API called Preferences. Okay. So what I could do is I could have, let's say I have a property here, and I'm going to make it a string, and I'm going to call it username. Right? The first thing that I could do if I wanted to, I could come in here and I could call preferences.get, and I'm going to put name of username. This is just a string, but I'm using that because I do typos all the time.
Yeah.
And then you provide a default value, so I'm just going to put string.empty. Okay, so when this app first launches, when this page first launches, it's going to get a preference called username and get the value of it. But what I really want to do is, of course, assign that to a variable. So the username is going to be that. And what I can do now, if I wanted to, is I can go up to here where it says hello Luke, get rid of that, give it a name. I'm going to call it greeting label. And then back in here, I can go greeting label.text equals username. Right?
Yep.
And then what I can do is I can have another entry here where you enter your name. In fact, what I'm going to do here is, just to make it easier, is I'm going to give it a placeholder. Okay? Enter the increment value. And enter the step, increment step. I'm going to put another entry up under the
image.
Under the image.
Yep.
Yep.
Just to confuse everybody.
Entry width request equals 200, just to make it the same as the other one. Placeholder. What is your name? Okay.
Yeah.
Now I could wire up another button to save the name. I'm just going to do it in the same event handler here because I'm lazy.
Okay.
So when you click the button, it's going to save the value to the username preference. Do you want another button?
No, but don't you need to give it an x.name so we can access it?
You're right, I do. So x.name name entry.
Oh, it's not x.name, is it?
You're right.
You know what I mean?
Name.
Yes.
I do. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Okay, so now we can access it on our code behind,
yeah,
right?
And do you know what? Let's just add another button, right? So button text equals save name. Clicked. And I can just go ahead and add a new event handler there. I could give it a special name, but I'm not going to. Do you know what we could do, right? Just to make this a bit more interesting, let's wrap these in a horizontal stack layout, so those appear horizontally next to each other.
Oh yeah, right. So you can nest all of these different layouts just for individual slices of your view then that you want.
can,
Yep.
yeah. All right, so now what I want to do in my event handler here is I want to get the username equals name, what did I call it? Name entry.
Yep.
Dot text, and then actually I wanted that to be that's what I really wanted to do there.
Yes.
And I want to do the same thing here. Probably stick that in another method and call it from both places, but I'm not going to do that right now.
And yeah, so we have to like reassign the text value again.
Yeah, so I'm going to go preferences.set, name of username, username.
Okay, so where does it save these preferences?
That's a very good question, and it depends on the device or the operating system.
Right.
So it's an abstraction, and you know, on iOS it saves it in the app preferences. There's an app preferences. Same thing on Android. In Windows it stores it in app data.
Right. As some sort of proprietary file type or something like that.
Yeah, we can go and have a look at it if you want.
No, I'm not. No, that's fine. Well, I'm sure I'll like somehow manage to try and convince you to open it up and hex edit it or something like that.
Yeah.
See what happens. So, no, but the point is that it saves it somewhere where you know it's always going to have permissions to write. And can you save any data type to your preferences? Does it have? In fact, yeah. Like, answer that one first. Can you save any data type?
No. So it's strings, right? So what you could do is you could, you could have a complex type and you could serialize it to JSON and save that.
Yep.
But once you're doing that, you probably want to do something a bit more, something like a database.
Okay.
And I'm not going to build one from scratch, but I have got an example I can show you.
Yeah.
So we'll look at that in a moment.
Yep.
But here's our little horizontal stack layout. Now we should have centered that, so let's just go and do that now. Horizontal options, center. You'll notice here that I'm typing very little. It's just IntelliSense doing it all for me. Makes it super easy. And also, I don't know if you spotted in the XAML previewer here that it's centered straight away, but there it is as well, right?
And it's got the little material underlined, does it? Yeah.
That's actually a WinUI entry. So
oh,
yeah,
right,
so
okay.
It's got a thicker bottom border, but it's got a, you see it's got that placeholder there as well, and
Yep.
this one has a placeholder. So I'm just going to go ahead and put Luke there,
Okay.
save name, hello Luke, and just to show you that that's persisted, we'll just close it and go and run it again. And this time it's going to load that from preferences and as soon as the screen loads, it's just going to say hello, Luke, straight away.
So do your preferences persist between debug sessions as well?
Oh, absolutely. There it is.
Yeah, right.
It's written to disk.
So even if you're running it on an Android emulator or what have you, it still persists that?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Nice. And can you just query the entire preferences object or library?
No.
No?
You have to ask it for a property with a specific name.
Okay. Yeah. So you would want to be careful about what you're adding there and just keep a handle on, you don't, because I'm assuming once you've added something to preferences, it'll stay there forever until the app gets uninstalled or something.
Yeah, you can delete them.
Only if you know what they are, though.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, look, like I said, that's preferences. You can also store more complex things. You do have access to the file system, so you can open and save files. You can write to disk. That can be any kind of file type you want. You can also use databases. I'll just show you here. Here's one I made earlier. So this is an app called MAUI To Do, and this is, as you might expect, a to-do app.
Yeah.
And this uses a database. So I could go ahead here and say record MAUI videos with Luke. Set this as due today, which it's today, and if I unset it accidentally, let's say tomorrow, I'm going to add. I think that's going to crash now because I'm currently working on that.
Okay, but yes, you're writing that to a database. Is that like a SQLite database?
It's SQLite.
Yep.
And in fact, we can probably find it here on the Android device as well. There it is, MAUI To Do. So I've got two. There's two versions. One of them doesn't work and crashes when you save it. This is the one that does work. So you can see that I can go record MAUI videos with Luke, add, and that's going to get added to my list here.
Why is that in American date time?
Interesting, you should ask that. You remember we were talking about date pickers in another video, and we were saying that it uses the device's locale settings. On this Android emulator, that's using American date times.
Really?
Yeah, because that's what comes out the box with the emulator, and I haven't bothered going in and changing it.
Oh, right. Okay. There you go. Fair enough. Interesting. Really interesting. All right. So you can save your data, simple data, to preferences. If you wanted to go anything sort of, a little bit more heavy than, say, basic strings, you would then want to start interacting with some sort of database or external data store, right, that's outside of preferences.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, it's pretty much the same as every other .NET stuff now, right, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it, 100%. You're in .NET land at this point.
Yeah, it's all very familiar. It's very familiar. Great. All right, that's very interesting. Thank you again for the walkthrough. I feel like I could almost write a MAUI app now.
I think you're getting very close.
Yeah. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and please stick around to see the last video or two that Matt Goldman and myself do. This has been Luke Cook from SSW. We will see you next time. Thank you.